Well, hello friends, you can tell it is an extremely bright and sunny day. And right now we're sitting mid-April, and I think it's important to say the date so you can kind of know that I'm in zone 5B. Usually a day like today in April in Iowa, where I live, is gonna still be chilly. Right now we're having unprecedented warm today. It is 84 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's quite warm. But what I'm doing is still spring work because we are still in spring, we are still before the growing season. And today I'm focusing here over at my mom's house where I go back and forth between. I'm in her raised bed garden to focus on the strawberry beds behind me. So every year we have two beds. They're about 4 foot by 10 foot each, and they produce, of course, strawberries for us, but I do prepare them every year. I think it's important to kind of go over what we're gonna be doing to them and how to get them ready. So you can see on the road there is a planter going by in a tractor. You know it's that time of year about. What I'm doing right now though is these two strawberry beds. So these have been in for quite a few years, and what we do every year is make sure we let them generate new strawberries. So that's one key factor, is that strawberries push out new plants on what are called runners. And you can see like this plant right here would have an attached runner coming from this plant. So every year we take out about a third of each bed and let them move slowly over time back and forth. So you're always having new plants, because the older plants get, the less strawberries, and the smaller strawberries you're gonna get. So what I'm doing right now is making sure that I fertilize these for the upcoming year, because to me, just think about it like your body. If you need to eat and need beautiful food, need healthy food to nourish yourself, add nutrients, plants really do the same. So just like since they're in a raised bed, even if they were in-ground gardening, they're not always getting the nutrients they need. So to do that, we're gonna add some fertilizer, and I'm actually even gonna use some straw this year too to make sure that I bed them well. So I'm using Berrytone. I've used this for quite a few years now. The important thing is to use something that's gonna boost blooms, but also going to increase the health of your soil. You know, that's why I love those Espoma products, because they really work in tandem to not only help the health of the plant in that year, but help the soil year to year, so you're continually going to be getting organically rich and beautiful soil. So the key here, as with anything really, is just to know the size bed you're gonna have and read on the package instructions to know how many pounds you need for a bed. So you can use this both on new beds. If you're just planting a strawberry bed, this is a great thing to start your bed off with, and then you can use it 2 times a year to actually fertilize your berries, early spring and late spring. You wanna wait, I think it's like 45 or 60 days in between. And what's great about it is, like I said, it's going to help the soil overall. Now, you're gonna see that you can just sprinkle it on. Now, the one thing I will admit, the package instructions are to work it into the top few inches of the soil. Now, sometimes in established beds such as this, you're gonna be able to see how working it into the soil isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do. Now, I will go in and make sure it's off the leaves. I will rake it in lightly, but since we have such nice raised beds here, you can see I can work down and get into this top layer of soil really easily. So going through and roughing it down in, it's gonna be great. Now with this unprecedented warm weather, it's making the strawberries grow a lot quicker than they usually would. So these are June bearing berries. Both beds are June bearing. You can buy both June bearing and ever bearing strawberries. We have always found, this is my mom and I, that June bearing will give you the largest and kind of best crop. Ever bearing give you one heavy crop at first, and then sporadically will give you berries going forward, but they're usually smaller and not as much. So we always prefer June bearing. I don't remember the specific variety, and I know you're gonna ask. I think one of them is Honey-O is a big one I think we used to really like. I don't remember which bed that is. We have 2 different types. We moved both these here from Mom's previous in-ground garden that was a few feet away, and we started all new plants just by plucking them out and planting new ones in. So you can kind of work with whatever you have, but what I would do is go around on an existing bed and just lightly be able to put it all in with your hands. Since these are raised beds, we can have sporadic rains. It used to be that spring was always a really rainy season. It can kind of be hit or miss anymore, so we do have some drip line in these beds that just stays here, but what we have noticed is pill bugs, you know those little pill bugs, they kind of like to fester sometimes underneath the strawberries if they're being watered. So in the past, we didn't usually used to bed them with anything, but I am gonna bed them with some weed-free straw. Try to find something that's weed-free, but what this is going to do is allow us to have a little bit of a bed underneath those strawberries. So over time, it can kind of act as Think of it as a slight mulch and a slight bedding. So when the berries start setting, they're going to actually be able to produce their fruit and set it hopefully on the straw, so there'll be a barrier between the soil and the berry, which I think should help those pill bugs not be quite so bad, because what they do is they eat on the berries. So I'm going to try to bed this in some straw, and since the berries, they're starting to push out quite a bit, the plants, but they still have quite a bit more to grow. This bed will be covered in green foliage eventually. I think it will be able to grow out on top of the straw once it's on there. So both strawberry beds are ready. Now, it looks like the straw is all sitting on top, but as those leaves continue to grow and really bush out of all the plants, they'll start canopying over that straw. And I'll keep every so often going out and making sure. Now, I know a lot of people always wonder when I do things like this, what about wind? Because I get a lot of wind. Usually where my raised beds are, it's protected enough that I don't have an issue with it blowing away. Also, as it gets watered and or rained on, that really helps keep it there. So I haven't really had issues with any of that, and I make sure to check it obviously every day. You should always walk through your vegetable garden once you start planting things or doing things every day, just to really check. So the strawberry beds are ready to go. I have them fertilized. I can do another late fertilizing application in late spring yet after this, right before they're about to start bearing, which will really help the plants, because producing all that fruit really taxes the plants. So now I want to focus on some onions. So when it comes to onions, this bed you can see is fairly ready. It has some great raised bed mix that was put on it last year, and so that's why it's so nice and easy to work with. See how easy I can dig in it? The point of a raised bed is to never till the soil, don't walk on the soil, obviously don't push it down, don't want to compact it. Instead, what's happening is the soil is only being added to with maybe compost every year, a nice light top dressing of some raised bed mix if needed. And so it always stays loamy and easy to work with. It's well draining. You know, raised beds have so many benefits, and I think every year I learn more and more that I really do like them. So in this bed we have some garlic and shallots that I planted last fall. So these are some Dutch red shallots, I believe, and then I have some soft neck garlic beside it. So the rest of this bed is going to be for onions. Now, the big thing with onions, and I learned this the hard way, is the type of onion you choose, specifically the variety of a long day or short day onion, is super important. So where I live, long day onions are what are going to do best, and that means they're going to grow best, which means they're going to store best and keep the best for you. So if you live, depending where you live in the United States, you want to look up on a map whether you're in a long day or short day onion growing area. So if you're like me and you're a long day, you're going to make sure to pick varieties that are long day onions. That way, you have the right ones and they're going to do much better. That right away to me is a super important thing. So I have both Patterson for like a yellow onion, and then I have Red Wing for a red onion. I did already plant from seed to kind of test it this year, some Walla Walla onions. They're a yellow onion also. And I just sprinkled that seed in late winter, and it's now all coming up. So I'll thin out these few rows of onions up here and leave those. But what I want to do first is prepare this bed with a little bit of just garden tone. So onions like a nitrogen-rich fertilizer. This is more of an all-purpose fertilizer, but it works really well on onions. And so you just want something, since onions are really a root vegetable, they need to have good green growth on top. And that's what a nitrogen-rich fertilizer will do. So you know numbers on a fertilizer. This is 344. So it's not as strong as some, but it still is going to have that nitrogen of 3% in it. That's really going to help with that top green growth. And I like to just mix that in a little bit here. Now, the rain obviously will mix it in too, but since I have that nice light raised bed mix right on top, I can easily just go through and work this on. If you're building raised beds, make sure to build them 4 foot wide, no wider, because then you can reach them easily from both sides. I'm trying to stay on one side since I'm doing a video, but otherwise I go back and forth usually. So what I'm going to do is just create, with a little trowel here, little furrowed rows, just so I can roughly know where I'm starting. And if I create these, so they're more markings for me, because I don't really need to dig too much since the soil's so easy to work with. What you do want to do is know the type of onion you're planting, so you know how big that onion gets, because however big it gets is how much you really want to space it. So depending on the onion, you know, it could be 4 to 6 inches apart. You know, sometimes what I will do though, this is something my mom taught me. She's off camera right now doing some other things, but She taught me that if you plant onions a little close, what you can do is start using them early and pick out the ones in between, like every other onion, and use those more as a spring onion, and then let the others grow full term. So it kind of just depends. And recently I was doing question answers on social media on my stories. And one of the big questions was, how do you know when different things are ready? Carrots, onions, different vegetables. The biggest thing is look at the variety you're planting. And on either the seed packet or the information that comes with it, it should say days to maturity. That's roughly that you know once you plant it, the days it should take until it's about mature. Now with onions, obviously the old adage where I live is they don't want to see the August sun. So they should start dying off probably mid to late July. Then you remove them, let them cure, and then store them. So I'm gonna start putting in rows of these. Then we'll talk about care. So the bed behind me is done. Now, when you're going to buy onions, you can of course start them from seed. You can do transplants or you can do bulbs. Now these are transplants because I think they do better. Transplants are usually growing earlier in the year that you buy them. Bulbs are usually growing when you buy those little bulbs the year before, and I don't think they store as well once you grow them and try to keep them. So these seedlings pretty much, or starts that come dry root, those to me, if you're not going to start your own, these are the way to go. So they're all planted. Obviously watering them in well now is important, and onions can be heavy drinkers for a while because it's all about creating that big bulb. Now we're going to be getting quite a bit of rain this coming week, so I'm going to let these go for today, see what the rain does, and then I will water them accordingly. But since we've done fertilizer now in 2 ways so far today, we have done strawberries with berry tone, we've done onions with some garden tone. I think we should really end with one more way I love to use fertilizer in the spring, which is gonna be on the fruit trees. So behind me is a big orchard and I wanna talk about it. I'm out here in our orchard where we have I think I've planted over 20 trees now from pretty young stages that are apple, peach, pear, cherry, plum, apricot. Now all of them, so in the past I haven't fertilized them a lot. We used to have a really old orchard. Over the years, it was so old for my great-grandparents that slowly trees were either just getting weak and not doing much or falling over in storms. So this is a newer orchard I started about 8 years ago now, and it's been producing pretty well. Last year it had a really good bumper crop, especially of the apples and of apricots. So what I do notice is fertilizing the trees and feeding them, just like I said with everything else. If you can add nutrients that not only helps the soil, but helps the trees too, helps produce more blooms, healthier plants, it to me has been making a big difference. So tree tone, what's great about it is I use it on certain shade trees. It does really well on younger maples when I fertilize them. But then all these fruit trees, I'm able to put tree tone on. So obviously they have, you can see here, somewhat of a mulch ring. This used to be a barnyard out here in pasture. So it has fairly fertile soil, but also when it was scraped at one time for an old building that was here, has some clay areas. So anytime I can amend the soil and add to it, with compost and or this tree tone, to me it helps me feel good. So again, it goes by pounds, but I just sprinkle it around the tree. Now, usually I would go get my rake, which I think I forgot at home. So I'm gonna sprinkle this around. And then what I'm gonna make sure to do is get it into that mulch layer a little bit. So today I'm gonna use my hands. Usually I would use a landscape rake or a hard rake. But what this is gonna begin to do is get it closer to the soil contact, because we're getting into the top couple inches is pretty ideal. But what it's gonna also do is allow, so when we're starting to get rains here soon, it's gonna really start taking that and taking it down to the roots, where slowly it will work into the roots and the soil. So the one thing about any fertilizer you wanna think is, this is organic fertilizer. So it's rich with different organic matter that, yes, can smell like a farm a little bit. So over time, it works down, that smell goes away. If you have pets, they can be attracted to it. So you're gonna watch that until it's well watered in. And pretty soon this will kind of be, after a rain or two, this pretty much gets down into the soil and I don't really worry about that. But I've already fertilized all the others and I just wanna finish up with this one. So if you were following my stories this spring, you may remember that in February, on some really nice days, I came out and I trimmed all these fruit trees. Well, we are now sitting in April. We're having an extra warm April too. All spring, all year has been extra warm. But I want to go up and show you they're just beginning to break bud. So if you look here closely, some of them are open on this apple, but what there are tons and tons of pink blooms all along all these branches. So remember I said I like open vase method for pruning trees. That means the center of the tree is open. So it looks like a V, an open vase. And what that does is bring all that light, that air circulation to the center of the tree, and it allows for ample amount, and the ideal amount really, of blooms all around. So slowly over time, I've been able, since I started with all these with whips, they were about 4 or 5 foot when I got them, and was able to trim them and shape them now into hopefully the trees I want. This whole orchard is really coming together. And fertilizing them every year, sometimes twice a year, is able to help me have that stamina on the trees and that growth that to me is really essential. So today we covered 3 different fertilizing I like to do for the garden. I like to do berry tone on my berries. Any type of berry you have, it works great on. I like to do the tree tone obviously on fruit trees. It does work on maple trees and certain other shade trees also. And then the garden tone is a great all-purpose. If you feel like your garden just needs some extra nutrients, some good organic matter to add to the soil, I used it on onions, which do prefer a nitrogen-rich fertilizer, but this one has done great for me in the past, so I just enriched with that. Compost is always another great thing. If you're worried about amendments and what to do to your soil, anytime you wonder, add good organic compost. If you don't have your own pile, buy good organic compost. Anytime you can add compost to soil, garden beds, trees, fruit trees, you're gonna be adding organic matter that works and enriches the soil and really just improves it over time, because that's the whole point. The better the soil, the better the plant or the vegetable you're gonna produce, and the more nutrients it's gonna have too. That's the key. So thanks for gardening with me today. We have a lot more to do. We have a lot more gardening coming, but until then, we're gonna have some healthy soil.